This week, a special mental health edition of In Depth, as the COVID-19 pandemic has only magnified the importance of taking care of yourself. It's also brought attention to a different kind of pandemic, the stigma surrounding mental health. On a special edition of In Depth, we're doing our part to break that stigma by sharing the unseen struggles our guests have endured out of the spotlight.
I couldn't be a worse father, and I couldn't be a worse human being.
From the lowest points of depression.
I felt there's been times in my life where I've been so low that, is it worth it?
To encouraging moments of self-discovery.
Now I get to be unapologetically myself.
These larger-than-life personalities are proof mental health issues can affect anyone.
You're in an empty hotel room in a foreign country, and who do I call?
And that everyone is capable of overcoming them with help.
If your brain chemistry is somehow a little tweaked, you're somehow expected to just deal with it. But there's a medicine
We
that
hope
fixes
these stories might aid you or someone you know fighting similar circumstances.
It showed me of how vulnerable we have to be.
Let's talk about it right here on In Depth. In November 2013, Dak Prescott and his brothers Tad and Jace lost their mother to colon cancer. Not wanting to disrupt their lives, Peggy hid her symptoms and told Dak and Tad not to return home to care for her. But Jace was finishing school nearby and was there for Peggy's final days. The burden took a heavy toll on Jace, likely playing a part in his April 2020 suicide. Tad's fiance gets a call from Jace's longtime girlfriend with the news. How did you find out what happened?
It's crazy. All throughout this quarantine and this off season, I started experiencing emotions I've never felt before. Anxiety for the main one. And then, honestly, a couple of days before my brother passed, I would say I started experiencing depression, and to the point of I didn't want to work out anymore. And hadn't been sleeping at all. But for one reason, one night, I sleep the best I've slept, and so I woke up, probably the best night of sleep I've ever had in 2020 from the worst news, some of the worst news I'll ever get.
Getting to Dak's house, I just couldn't bring myself to go inside yet. I just couldn't see Dak, because I truly felt like I'd failed both him and my mom, because that was my... Because the last thing she told me was that it was my job and that I had been prepared my entire life to keep us together. And then after she passed, the first words Jay said to me was, "You have to be strong enough for all of us." And I really thought I was. So for him to be in so much pain or whatever it was that was going on, and again, me not to recognize it, because I literally just saw my brother 3 days before it all happened, and everything seemed fine. I get the message that he's gone, and it's like, I failed them all. I failed Dak, I failed Jace because I wasn't there for him, and then more importantly, I failed my mom's memory because I didn't do what she's always asked me to do. I didn't keep her boys safe.
But you know that's not your fault. You did everything you could. If you'd known.
Yeah, if, but like I said, I still feel like I should have.
It showed me of how vulnerable we have to be as humans, how open we have to be, because our adversity, our struggles, what we go through, is always going to be too much for ourselves, and maybe too much for even one or two people, but never too much for a community, or never too much for the people and the family that you love. So we have to share those things.
I I want to take you to 2008. In addition to just struggling, still on the field, now comes August and your personal life just ends up getting upended. Your best friend, David Edwards, how close were the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, he was like, David is like a adopted brother in the Smith family. You know, when he committed suicide, it's a lot of things you deal with, you know, as a best friend. You know, that I was so ingrained in what was going on with me, and football was not going well, and I'm in the middle of camp. You know, and there's a lot of things you deal with there that you wish you could go back and I could have done differently. At the same time, you're, really pissed off at him.
And your wife, Liz, said you really struggled with, like, forgiving yourself for not answering.
It was hard, right? I mean, yeah, in camp and having missed phone calls from David and looking at my call log and remember staring at it and, not prioritizing, right? Like, I was so focused on me and football and camp and what I was going through and dealing with that you didn't have time, didn't make time. Yeah, and definitely, haunted me for a long time, you know?
How'd you get past it?
Grieving's different for everybody, you know? Definitely, like I said, it was probably best I wasn't playing that year, that I was on IR, because I was dealing with a lot. Time moves on and the days go on, and you kind of slowly work through a lot of that. You finally get to that first day, weeks down the line, you finally get to that first, few hours where it's not on your mind.
I think sometimes it's good to see someone when things are going well, not just when things are going badly. It's certainly something that's worth trying, and I'm not saying that every person should, that's up to the person to decide, but for me personally, I think it's helped.
Welcome back to a special mental health awareness episode of In Depth. According to a CDC survey, more than 40% of adults experienced symptoms of anxiety or depression in January 2021, up from only 11% in December 2019. NBA star Kevin Love has suffered from anxiety and depression for years and is an advocate of mental wellness. He spoke with us about the positive impact therapy had in pulling him out of one of his lowest points. And that season where you only played 18 games for the Timberwolves, you pretty much, as I understand it, locked yourself in your apartment, rarely came out of your bedroom, blinds were drawn, TV was off. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, when you get to that point and it's day after day being the same, you come to a point where, the darkest moments come into play and suicidal thoughts come into play. And you start, planning it out, and the good thing that happens is when you do search that, it comes up with the National Suicide Prevention Line. There was a couple ways that I had toyed with, but it was just scary to get down that route and think about the idea of taking my own life. But it was something that crossed my mind pretty often, especially when you're in a moment like that.
Did you ever attempt to?
No, thankfully.
Does it ever get to a point anymore where you still have suicidal thoughts, or?
I think, listen, if you've been down that road, and I don't know how, if whoever's going to watch this who's had those thoughts before, I think it does cross your mind. And I've just learned to speak my truth, honestly. I've learned that, nothing haunts us like the things we don't say, so me keeping that in is actually more harmful.
Why have you said one of the best days of your life happened after you started going through therapy?
Because now I get to be unapologetically myself. Like I just am who I am. And I have these real flaws and these, things about myself that I'm not necessarily proud of, but I deal with on a daily basis. And, you know, in playing all my cards, that was the scariest thing that I likely did in my life. I think that's just allowed me to be so comfortable in my own skin, and I got to be myself truly for the first time, probably in my entire life. I think keeping your mind occupied and on a steady path and continuing to grow can really put depression from that aspect at bay.
You said, you know, on kind of the first marriage front once, divorce brought back bad feelings from the past. What do you remember from that time?
Horribly painful time, fraught with emotion and bad feelings, and the failures that you go. You know, I thought, I couldn't be a worse father, and I couldn't be a worse human being.
You were in, I think, therapy 3 times a week.
Oh yeah, it's human nature to go through these kind of, not just depressions. It's not necessarily a clinical thing. You just go through dark times. You just go through moments where you think, oh man, I'm fucked, and I'll never be anything other than just like this guy that I am now. But you learn. The aid that you can get from just asking these questions of yourself and verbalizing it to somebody who's really a really good student of human nature can help you get through some very tough times. Now, sometimes it's a really good friend. I've had versions of all those things that have been the type of people that have said, you know, you're not a horrible person, and this will pass. You just got to have a little bit of faith in the goodness that is inside yourself.
If you break your ankle, you're not expected to just walk it off.
Right.
But if your brain chemistry is somehow a little tweaked, you're somehow expected to just deal with it.
How severely depressed did you become, and how would you describe the emotional toll it took on you?
I didn't just lose the title, I lost myself. And it was years before I could really look in the mirror and say, I'm who I want to be. I think, of course, I found my religion and a place in this life that had nothing to do with boxing. That's when I really was totally restored.
This week on In Depth, we're raising awareness for mental health. Our hope is, if you or someone you know is in need, these stories will encourage you to seek help. Mentalhealth.gov is one of the resources you can visit. It outlines warning signs, how to start conversations about mental health, and immediate ways to get assistance. Like Kevin Love and Tom Hanks, John Hamm also praised therapy's benefits after he lost both parents by age 20.
It's a crater, and you realize this explodes, and you have to kind of manage it, but you don't know what it's like to mourn or grieve or go through the famous sort of processes, because you're a kid. You think everything lives forever, and that's the time at which I got into therapy for the first time. My sister was like, "You need to see somebody. You're sleeping till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like something's not right."
Your friends said even when they knew you were struggling, you always had the brave face.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're kind of taught as polite Midwesterners. Is like, don't worry about it, son. Don't want to overshare, fine. But, you know, seeing the therapist at that time was profoundly helpful, because it does what it does. It gives you another perspective on something that you can't quite figure out. And it's like, it's got the most interesting stigma, but, you know, people think if you break your ankle, you're not expected to just walk it off.
Right.
But if your brain chemistry is somehow a little tweaked, you're somehow expected to just deal with it. It's like, well, but there's a medicine that fixes it.
People probably are unaware of how lonely being an elite athlete can be.
Exceptionally lonely. I mean, that's why I got a dog. How many dogs can you have? You know, I have 3 dogs, and I'm becoming like the crazy dog lady. So I had to, call it quits at 3. But, you win and there's all this excitement and, everyone's like, oh, this is great. And then you go home and you're in an empty hotel room in a foreign country. And like, who do I call? I don't know. It's just, you're by yourself. And there's not enough, Netflix, Amazon shows to, make you forget that.
3-time Olympic medalist Lindsey Vonn devoted her life to skiing, persevering through countless injuries to become arguably the greatest skier ever. So when it came time to retire, she was left feeling empty.
I was depressed and, it was a really hard time.
But she's found a renewed sense of purpose with her foundation, which provides scholarships and programs in education and sports to empower youth across the U.S.
I had a young girl who cut herself. And after my camp, she stopped doing it. And that made me so happy. And I was like, this is what I'm here for. I mean, you take a child that wants to kill herself, and I can help her. Sorry.
What about her story resonated with you so much?
I don't know. I mean, it's like, what does a ski racer have to do with, some kid who's underprivileged? It's powerful, and I never set out to do. I just wanted to ski fast, and if I can help one person, which I felt like I did, then it means something. It's more than just winning.
I can't tell you how many letters I received from people thanking me for writing this book and talking about the same things they experienced growing up.
It was overwhelming. My world was coming down. I couldn't lie anymore. I've been exposed. Every time I take that drink, there he goes again. Yeah, I was in a bad place.
And at some point or points you contemplated suicide, you said. Why?
Oh, I don't know how many times, because that's the easy way out. Staying down is the easy way out.
If you or someone you know is suicidal or in emotional distress, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. We continue our mental health awareness show with entrepreneur and philanthropist Ray Dalio.
I think the statistic is something like 24% of the population in one form or another has been diagnosed as some form of mental illness. So we all are dealing with this in some particular capacity. My version of that was Paul's bipolar. And so for those out there, there's a path, and it's a very, very difficult thing. Those 3 years were hell, At one point, he called me up and, he was about to take his life because the pain of the depression was just so great. And he wanted to, say goodbye, say, you've been a good dad and so on. And then I said, well, I've got to give you a hug. So, wait for me and I'm going to come there and I'll give you a hug and so on. And I was able to talk him out of it. And there was a psychologist by the name of Kay Jamison who wrote about bipolar. She was bipolar, is bipolar. And he met her. We got them together, and that's what got him on the right path.
In his best-selling book, Basketball Hall of Famer Jerry West revealed his lifelong battle with depression stemming from physical abuse he endured as a child.
I felt there's been times in my life where I've been so low that, is it worth it to feel this bad all the time? But I've had some success in dealing with that.
How would you deal with it?
Well, I wanted to try to do things for younger people. I wanted to try to make a difference in people's lives. I think there's so many things hidden by people today that probably maybe they talked about a little bit more, and particularly if you have a platform, as I do sometimes. I think it is therapeutic. I can't tell you how many letters I receive from people thanking me for writing this book and talking about the same things they experienced growing up and talking about how they got through it and how I got through it.
Thank you for joining us on this mental health edition of In Depth. We hope these stories encourage you to share your struggles or seek help if necessary. And we conclude with what the late Robin Williams once said: "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always."